How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Julie, this is Jonathan from Rivers and Robots.
It's so nice to meet you.
This is Julie Jones. So Julie is pretty much the law around here.
Okay.
If you stay on the right side of Julie, you're staying.
Okay.
North America's going to be fine.
Okay.
After a few days, I started to get calls from people saying, Is Jonathan from Rivers and Robots in town? Like, of course, I wasn't going to be the only one to have noticed their potential, and I already knew that other labels were after them. So yeah, the day comes when you put in an offer, and they then go and speak to the people that represent them, and you try and do a deal. But there's an unusual dynamic to this, a bit of a twist, that they aren't really very interested in money, which is really refreshing, but kind of different, and just takes a little bit of time to get your head around.
Okay, this may be completely naive of me or outsider, but I'm sorry, money? They're not interested in money?
No, I've known them for a few years now, and they really don't seem to be interested in money at all. In fact, they've set themselves up as almost like musical missionaries. So all of the money they make from the band and from music goes into this fund, which they essentially give away. And so when you're talking to them about like, well, you know, for this we would pay that much and whatever, they're just like, yeah, whatever, you know, like those things are not important to them, which I absolutely love.
Is this common?
It's not common at all. I mean, Jesus obviously didn't have a bank account, which is where some people get a little bit caught up. But he talked more about money than any other subject he ever talked about. He realized the power of it. And I think money is something, you can harness the power of money for good, or you can be controlled by it. And that's the big struggle. And what I love about Rivers and Robots is they're almost mocking money by turning it on its head and not really being that interested in it. And yet they seem to be able to do the things they want to do because they harness it and channel it in the right ways. I'm Chris Lawson-Jones. I've worked in Christian music for over 15 years. I've seen it grow and grow in the face of the great music industry recession. I believe we're entering a new era of Christian music. Something's brewing. With Stormzy, Chance the Rapper, Bieber, and many others drawing on Christianity for inspiration. And with this stuff I'm hearing coming through now, I'm convinced the Christian world is making the kind of music that's truly exceptional. What if there was a label for this music? What Sub Pop was for grunge in Seattle, what Ministry of Sound was for dance in London, what Motown was for, well, Motown. That's a big ambition, isn't it? It is, but I've got 8 months to find out. 8 months where I'm going to be taking this new label, Running Club Records, from a pipe dream to a first single.
Previously on Running Club Records.
So Running Club is going to Nashville. This city is church and music. All of the major Christian publishers, record labels, recording studios happen to be in Nashville. So it's the Hollywood of Christian music.
So Chris, I would assume that seeing others after Rivers and Robots just must make you want them more.
So there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of number crunching, a lot of will they, won't they, and then finally I get the call from their lawyer to say I'm sending this to the band to sign. And it was like all my Christmases on the same day. We had a band. We have a band. We actually have a band on Running Club. Running Club will go to the ball.
Meanwhile, back in Nashville.
While we're in town, we want to make the most of it and meet with as many people as we can on the industry side who will be able to help Running Club and its artists when we get off the ground.
I'm Cole Flynn. I do marketing and oversee digital marketing for Integrity Music.
And so how do we break in? Like, what do we just do what we do and hope for the best?
I think there's some of that. I think if you ask anybody who has been really successful at something, they say it's 50% skill and talent, and it's 50% luck. In our case, we need anointing as well from God. We need to, in the running club, artists need to really just, ask that God goes before them and paves that way, because I think that's the only way that running club's really going to be successful, and hopefully that's the case. But success is also very subjective. If running club never leaves the UK, that doesn't mean it's not successful.
I mean, just growing up, that I know there's always been a rich history of UK music travelling to the US,
right?
And it'd just be interesting. It's just more interesting than anything to see if this translates in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think to put it in a nutshell, I think running club just has to be true to itself, and that's one of the things I think Americans love about UK music, is that it doesn't sound like American. Like, it doesn't sound like usually what's coming out of America, and that's why we gravitate towards it, because we need something different. So running club just needs to be running club.
It's Friday night, and I'm at the departure gate, about to get my flight back to London after a crazy but really productive week in Nashville. I think the one thing that I've been most encouraged about is that I met a lot of people this week who seem to be thinking the same thing that we're thinking in terms of why we're starting Running Club and the ethos of it and the reason behind it. And it encourages me that there might be something similar stirring in America. And if it's stirring in the UK and it's stirring in America, it might be kind of cooking up in other parts of the world as well. So it might kind of be bigger than I had thought it might be. In Running Club, we're trying to create a feeling of camaraderie between a like-minded group of musicians and artists. And it might actually be possible for us to build a sense of camaraderie and community between labels as well, who are trying to do the same thing. So, it gives you a little warm, fuzzy feeling to get through the horrific overnight British Airways code share partner flight experience. So I've been back from Nashville for a couple of weeks, and I catch up with Danny just to check in on how things are going.
Yeah, so we met in London Bridge and we're standing outside of the Shard, and we've had like breakfast for about an hour, just kind of doing general chit chat, and I'm like, right, we need to get somewhere. And I just say,
I think, obviously we've known each other quite a few years, and I feel like we're in a place in our relationship and how we approach business that we can talk honestly about stuff. And so I just had some feedback, some honest feedback about how I felt coming away from it. I wanted to pose the question, how serious do you see me as an artist? Because maybe in my head I wasn't fully convinced of that, or I just wanted to have that really honest chat. And it's hard, isn't it, when you're in that environment, because there's loads of other artists and there's loads of other agendas, and you are being pulled into a million and one things. But just to have an honest chat about what the future looks like. And
so you came away a little bit with a few questions about where you stood, basically, in the context of context of Running Club, and compared to other people who are also potentially on the label.
Yes.
In Nashville, I was kind of doing everything I thought in the right way. I was kind of playing the right kind of long game or quick game with different people. And so naturally I can see how it came across to Danny that he was being overlooked in some way.
To a point where now I'm beginning to try and go on this journey of what would music look like full-time for me, because it hasn't been so far. I think firstly it's having the audacity to believe that this is the right path for me. You know, I'm recently married, thinking about having kids, thinking about sustaining an income for my family. You know, is this something that is manageable and even achievable? My family have always been huge supporters and advocates for me, like massive, and it's meant a huge deal to me to always have that backing. But at the same time, when you wake up on a Monday morning and it's grey outside and you know you need to get up and go to work, you know, what does that work look like that allows, you know, my wife to thrive at home, you know, future kids to be well? So that has been my biggest thing.
A potential fault of mine is that I, having been on the artist side, that's what I was before I was doing what I do now. I've been in situations with people who do my job now, where they sort of made promises they couldn't keep to make me feel good.
Yeah.
And I think I'm so cautious of not doing that I sometimes probably under-promise to a too great an extreme.
I think your new name could be Cautious Chris.
Cautious Chris, all right, yeah. Yeah.
For good reason.
Yeah, so that's something I'm working on. And it's helpful to me that people like you can sort of talk to me honestly, because that helps me to try and be better at my job. And we are all just making this up as we go along, essentially. So I really appreciate your honesty, your ability to tell me how you're feeling, because it just helps me to know how to do this better.
Yeah.
My response to what Danny said was to say, okay, if you're up for it, I'm up for it. Because it's not that I don't believe in you, it's that I was trying to pace this out in a way that I thought was the most manageable for you. But we can take this up a gear if you're ready to take this up a gear. And the thing I was really impressed with Danny is that he went away, thought about all of those questions, talked about it with his wife, came back and said, boom, 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 we're ready. And now we're in a position where we can offer him a record deal and a publishing deal.
The best way I can describe where I'm at now is I think I'm trying to develop a thicker skin to the business and allow a really soft approach to the art. So it's not easy. It's really not easy to navigate passion and then process. I just feel like with Chris, like we could make amazing cutting edge music that you would hear anywhere in the world, you know, anywhere in the mainstream. That there'd be no differentiation between, oh, this sounds Christian and this sounds like, I want people to put it on and be able to feel proud putting it on in front of their friends that don't have faith and it not sound weird. That's what really excites me, is just getting out there, beginning to create, beginning to inspire other people, and just for, you know, making music makes me come alive. So
there's something that's come up a few times, and that's this idea that the music could cross over into the secular world. And I know that it's kind of like a bonus, that would be cool, but I just want to know, like, how much do you look to validation from the secular world?
My head says we don't need it because we have enough people in the Christian world to listen to our music and make it successful or support it. My heart says I'd love to see a day when we just get that seal of approval. I don't know whether that's a right motivation or a wrong motivation, but I think something in me, the little boy in me who grew up in two different musical worlds, I think I would love that affirmation that we've finally made music that's good enough to get that kind of high five. So it's not critical to us, but I can't deny that there's a part of me that would love that. What would blow my mind is if the real, like the tastemakers, like the Pitchforks, the Vices of this world, like even if they acknowledged it or talked about it, that would blow my mind.
I talked to Vice.
Okay.
and it's totally on their radar.
Hiya, my name's Emma Garland, and I'm associate editor at Vice UK.
Could you categorically say if like Vice would ever review a Christian album?
Theoretically, yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of albums that have come out recently and come out quite frequently that you could, although they don't ostensibly build themselves as Christian albums, like they're rooted very heavily in Christian culture. Like Stormzy's Gang Signs and Prayer is very, very religious, and he's very vocal about his Christianity, and that went to like #1 in the UK charts straight away. I think it's possible to make it cool, but not in the purity ring way that seems to be quite popular in America. Christianity is actually quite. It's got a really great aesthetic. Like, you know, it's got all that iconography. Like, churches look amazing. Like, you can do so much with it. Like, biblical imagery is very, very striking, and biblical art is incredible. And, you know, as a work of writing, the Bible's quite sick. So I don't like there's so much to play with there, and it's a really, really rich and incredible source of inspiration for any kind of art. People relate to iconography, they relate to very visual things and super aesthetic things, but if the message is quite earnest and it's seen as regressive or exclusionary in any way, I think in big 2018, that's where it'll come up against problems.
And I also talked to The Guardian music section.
Okay.
It's also on their radar.
Hello.
Hi, Alexis. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Hi, my name is Alexis Petridis. I am the chief rock pop critic of the Guardian newspaper.
All right. So what, like, from your point of view, what kind of sparked your interest in the Christian music scene?
Well, there is a sort of thought that at the moment, I suppose because we live in very uncertain times, you know, there is some sort of a yearning for spirituality. You know, it stands to reason in a way that we're living in an era where everything is shifting and changing. Some in some ways, you know, for the better, and in some ways for the worse. But it is shifting and changing quite dramatically. And it's understandable that in times like that, in times of real great uncertainty, people are going to be drawn to looking for some sort of deeper, you know, to me, meaning that a lot of stuff in the charts at the moment is stuff by, you know, ostensibly secular artists. The lyrics use a lot of kind of religious language. And that's something that's quite interesting. At the Brits this year, Stormzy stood up. I mean, Stormzy said a lot of things at the Brits, but he came out with a very explicitly Christian message. He talked very openly about his faith, which is not something that grime artists tend to do, and certainly is not something that artists generally at the Brits tend to do. So it's things like that. These are different areas that kind of interest me. And would it be possible for a rock band to come out with an explicitly Christian message and not have people in Britain look askance at it? Christianity. I honestly don't think people would have a problem with a band being open about their Christianity. I don't see why they would. You know, there was a band in the late 90s, early noughties called Delirious.
Yes.
And Delirious were a Christian band, worship band, and they nearly crossed over. They were playing pretty big venues, Shepherd's Bush, Empire, places like that. But, you know, if you went to a Delirious gig, it was different than going to just a rock gig because there were people there. It's worship music. There are people there with the one hand in the air and, you know what I mean, all that kind of malarkey.
Yeah.
And people view that as kind of, you know, the sort of, I guess people, you know, secular audience view that as a bit odd and a kind of weird atmosphere to be in. And, you know, Delirious got probably further than any explicitly Christian rock band has, and probably since there was a band in the 60s, early 60s called the Joy Strings. The Joy Strings had a couple of chart hits. They were like a sort of Merseybeat band, a bit like, sounded a bit like sort of Jerry and the Pacemakers or something, but they were made up of Salvation Army members in uniform, and they had a couple of hits. But so Delirious got like about, you know, but it never really became a thing. And the stumbling block I felt, for a wider audience was not that they were Christian, was that it was worship music, and that's different. It just has a different emphasis. I think there was quite a big distinction, and I think you would struggle still, to cross over.
Next time on Running Club Records.
And even through university, that was challenging. I'm the Christian guy, and so then everyone's watching how much you drink, and like sex is an issue as well. But then it's almost like I just decided to own the story.
This episode of Running Club Records was produced by me, Lily Ames. Sound design was by Ned Porter, and consultation was provided by Jonty Herman and Gavin Haynes. And if you're liking the podcast, you can follow the story in real time online. Follow Running Club Records on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And check them out at runningclubrecords.com.